our Lord. Amen. Let us now sum our prayers up in the prayer our Lord himself has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
Honorable Senators, I have apologies for absence from Senator Adams, Senator Drakes, and Senator Maynard, and indications of lateness from Senator Tate and Senator Hunt.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Mr. President, I'm commanded to lay the Public Finance Management Procedural Fiscal Rules 2021.
From select committees, questions to ministers, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate. Moved by Minister.
Senator Walker.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting to allow us to enable us to complete our work.
The question is that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Introduction of bills.
Senator Walker.
Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the Public Procurement Bill 2021. I beg to move the first reading of the Whistleblower Protection Bill 2021. I beg to move the first reading of the Remediation Agreement Deferred Prosecutions Bill 2021. I beg to move the first reading of the Constitution Amendment Number 3 Bill 2021. I beg to move the first reading of the Income Tax Country by Country Reporting Bill 2021.
The question is that these bills so mentioned be read the first time. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 5.
Order number 5.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Income Tax Country by Country Reporting Bill 2021.
Senator, the Most Honorable Mr. Jerome Xavier Walcott.
Mr. President, thank you so much. Mr. President, I believe that all members of this honorable chamber must now see it as an annual pilgrimage, if I may call it that we come in December to debate bills related to the international financial sector, which we recognize as being very important to Barbados, and bills to do with matters related to the OECD and certain conditions that are necessary. This bill speaks to the country-by-country reporting. And by way of background, I should state that Barbados is the 101st member of the inclusive framework of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, popularly known as the OECD, on base erosion and profit shifting. BEPS, which I know is familiar to all members because they've heard it every December since this sitting started. The inclusive framework is a group of countries which have pledged to implement measures aimed at tackling tax avoidance by multinational corporations. It was established in 2016, and this was by the G20 leaders when they urged that there needed to be implementation of a BEPS package, which had been released the previous year, and called on the OECD to develop a more inclusive framework with the involvement not only of G20 countries, but also including developing countries which were participating in international finance. By joining, Barbados works with the other members of this framework to implement the BEPS packages. Of course, the BEPS package provides 15 actions that equip government with the domestic and international instruments to tackle tax avoidance. Barbados is required as a member to implement the BEPS minimum standard, and this includes 4 actions. BEPS Action 5, harmful tax practices, countering harmful tax practice with a focus on improving transparency. And we debated this previously in this honorable chamber. BEPS Action 6, prevention of tax treaty abuse. This was also debated and passed in this chamber. There's the BEPS Action number 14, the mutual agreement procedure, making dispute resolution between jurisdictions more timely, effective, and efficient. This was also passed in this chamber. As I said, there are 4 of these standards which recognize the minimum standard, make up the minimum standard. The BEPS Action 13, which is the country-by-country reporting, is the one which we are debating here today. So I said Barbados has implemented the other 3, and this one has to be done. And it has been transmitted to us that Barbados should take steps to implement a domestic legal administrative framework to impose and enforce country-by-country reporting requirements as soon as possible. And this has come to us earlier this month. These were published by the OECD and reviewed by the Code of Conduct Group of the European Union, as I said earlier, December this year. And they're requesting a formal political commitment that Barbados intends to address the aforementioned recommendations in order to be in compliance with their tax good governance criteria. And Mr. President, I don't have to explain to honorable members, I think they're well aware of the issues of the various periods of blacklisting and grey listing by Barbados by these countries. The OECD, the argument for the country-by-country reporting, according to the OECD, the lack of quality data on corporate taxation has been a major limitation to the measurement of the fiscal and economic effects of tax avoidance. And it makes it difficult for tax authorities to carry out transfer pricing assessments on transactions between related companies, and even more difficult for them to carry out tax compliance audits. So this is seen as a necessary action. The BEPS Action 13 speaks to multinational enterprises with total consolidated group revenue of more than 850 million US, as reflected in their consolidated financial statements. And they are therefore required to prepare a country-by-country report with aggregate data on the global allocation of their income, their profit, their taxes paid, and economic activity among tax jurisdictions. And this report is then shared with the tax administrations for use in high-level transfer pricing and other base erosion and profit sharing risk assessments. To provide for the implementation of this country-by-country reporting, the government of Barbados is requested to execute the Multilateral Convention, the country-by-cultural multilateral competent authority agreement that sets forth rules and procedures as may be necessary for the competent authorities of jurisdictions implementing Action 13 to automatically exchange these reports. This therefore imposes a statutory obligation on the ultimate parent entity or other designed surrogate parent entity of any in-scope multinational enterprise to file a country-by-country report with the Barbados Revenue Authority no later than 12 months after the last day of the reporting fiscal year. Mr. President, Those countries that do not reach the threshold, this legislation does not apply to them, only those over 850 million US. And it is expected that the relevant reports will be filed using the already authorities built automatic exchange of information by portal, and thereafter the necessary exchanges will occur. The legislation also provides for the proposed legislation also provides for the imposition of a pecuniary penalty for instances of non-compliance and allows an aggrieved person to bring an appeal before the Barbados Revenue Appeal Tribunal. Mr. President, I'm not going to bore the Honorable Chamber by going into various parts and clauses, but suffice it to say that it is very important that we do this at this time. And as I said, I know honorable members understand and recognize that these are things that we have to do as part of the process. With those few words, I beg that this bill be now read a second time.
Thank you very much, Senator Walker. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chamber and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Honorable Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Yeah.
The Senate is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to call in parts and clauses. Part 1, clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 now stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 3 to 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 3 to 8 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 3 to 8 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 9 to 13.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 9 to 13 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 9 to 13 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
4, clauses 14 to 19.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 14 to 19 stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 14 to 19 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 20 to 22.
20 to 22.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 20 to 22 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 20 to 22 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Sorry, Mr. President. I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Income Tax Country by Country Reporting Act 2021.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Income Tax Country by Country Reporting Act 2021. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be suspended for 5 minutes.
The question is that this sitting be suspended for 5 minutes. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is accordingly so suspended. This sitting is resumed.
Order number 1, sir.
Order number 1.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Public Procurement Bill 2021.
Senator, the most honorable.
Point of privilege, sir.
Yes, Senator Walker. Senator Franklin.
Sir, again, I believe my privilege in this place is being abused. I got this bill. I noticed that this bill would be debated today on Friday. It is 163 pages. Does not give me time to research anything that I have to say. 66 pages. I would have to be a spectator on this. I don't expect the government to have a bill of this size. Yes, they circulated it, but they circulated it and give me short notice, because you have a lot of things on the paper that don't come in a timely manner. So I have to depend on when you're going to bring these bills with me, because there are lots, and they work elsewhere. The $1,400 don't cover me. I have to work. So I cannot, in all seriousness, spend time just waiting for a bill to come from the Senate, then to rush and debate it, rush and research it. And the places that I can research it, most of whom are closed over the weekend. So I cannot and I will not participate in the debate on this bill or any other. And so right now, sir, I think at this point, I won't be here, so I would like to wish the Senate a Merry Christmas. Because I'm not going to be a spectator. I don't come here to be a spectator, sir. Very sorry.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Senator Walker? Yeah. No, give me if you want to respond to the point.
Mr. President, I've heard my honorable colleague from on the other side. He did admit that the bill was circulated some time ago. I believe I'm being told it was as far back as 1st of November or the 2nd of November. And he made, I believe it once it circulated to the House, it circulated all the senators. Mr. President, I believe when these bills are circulated to the House, they circulate to the Senate. It is my understanding, and it's always been the convention, that bills are usually circulated and members are usually asked to come to prepare. I've been on both sides of this chamber, come to prepare to debate any matter that is circulated. The order paper was cleared last Monday, and I indicated specifically when I was speaking at the end of the day sitting that we would meet on today's date to debate a number of matters which had to be completed before December the 31st, 2021. Regrettably, this bill is one of those matters that are to be completed before the 31st of December this year, and indeed, this is the final sitting for the year. So I understand the honorable member's concern, but I would certainly seek to encourage him to stay, but if he wants to wish us a Merry Christmas, I would also be delighted to wish him a very merry and blessed Christmas. And I hope that he'll be able to get some rest and relaxation during this holy week. And remember that there's a God that we all serve above who is concerned about life and living. And that in those words, I would certainly wish him a very Merry Christmas. And I look forward to speaking to him before Christmas. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Walker. Senator Franklin, your points are noted. I've also noted the information provided by the Leader of the House concerning the circulation of the bill prior to formal notice of debate. But I certainly want to, I know that you have your hands full with other matters, and I thank you in advance of the close of our sitting for wishing us all the best for the holidays. I thank you in advance of the end of the sitting. We would normally exchange those greetings, best wishes for the holidays at the end of the sitting, but certainly we want to wish you all of the very best for the season and next year. and look forward to continue to work with you and to hear your spirited contributions on any and all matters before us into the coming year.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. When you wish me the best, you also wish me the best in relation to my problems with the nurses, sir?
Well, I don't think it matters. I just wish all the best for you. You know, we've been friends for many, many years, and long will that continue, and I always wish the very best for you.
So I interpret that to mean, sir, that you wish me the best.
I wish you the very best of health.
Everything.
Everything.
Sir, I can't stick around and read it. I can't read it and debate it at the same time, so thank you very much, sir.
I understand.
The most honorable. Thank you. I know you were behind me. Don't mind, you can't say so.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the honorable leader of the opposition in this honorable chamber leaves us, I rise to speak on a very important bill. I think it is understood globally that corruption via procurement is a problem that afflicts all countries globally, and Barbados is no exception. Over years, there have been stories, there have been complaints, there have been articles written about procurement and difficulties in Barbados. I use the word difficulties so that I am within the perimeter of the law. Certain difficulties relate to various processes, procurement processes over time. And it is a concern. I believe this has also engaged the attention of the concerned citizens group, that we're looking at a number of issues related to corruption. And we recognize that it is very important, and the whole issue of transparency, the need for competitive processes which are transparent and give us, in terms of costs, the best prices for goods and obtaining goods and services, especially being a small country which is struggling economically. We also think that and we've heard over the years about the certain big businesses benefiting. And within this bill, we are speaking in terms of expanding, giving new players an opportunity to be part of this process, competitive bidding and tendering, and also allowing SMEs to benefit. Mr. President, you would be aware that there's been attempts, and we've started the modernization of the national procurement system to make the procurement process more efficient in Barbados. This modernization has included a number of aspects, and the legislation, of course, is one vital one. There's been the changes within the Central Purchasing Department of the government to the Government Procurement Department with a new mandate to monitor and assess the entire processes that occur there. And this will entail more efficient management of common goods and services which are procured through the Government Procurement Department. They're looking to generate greater economies of scale, a decentralization of specialized goods and services procured through its various ministries and departments, and standardization of the various aspects of procurement carried out by the public entities in this country. I'm not sure if my colleague will speak about it, but they're looking to establish an e-tendering system to provide for dissemination of procurement opportunities and results of tenders, procurement processes through all procurement subsystems in Barbados. And this electronic procurement system will facilitate the process of electronic purchasing and tendering. And of course, includes automation of the procurement process from requisition to standardized contracts. All of this we know will contribute to a more efficient implementation of the procurement process. But of course, sir, I said one of the key aspect will be the establishment of a legal framework that will regulate practices in public procurement. And this bill seeks to do that. It seeks to standardize the entire public procurement process in Barbados. And the new legislation incorporates international best practices, and I will come to this later, applicable to the circumstances of Barbados. As well, I've been aware the process that is going through within the CARICOM single market, where we are looking at a CARICOM protocol on procurement, which we've looked at that in modeling this legislation. Indeed, this bill will provide a single set of rules for all sectors, including the procurement of drugs, and will apply, when I say drugs, I mean pharmaceuticals, Mr. President. Will apply to government ministries, departments, state-owned enterprises, commercial state-owned enterprises, all as defined within the Public Finance Management Act. And of course, the bill will regulate the public procurement and promote integrity, fairness, transparency, and as I said earlier, value for money and efficiency in public procurement. It will seek to establish the institutions required to conduct, manage, oversee, and regulate public procurement. It seeks to define the permitted procurement methods and set the procedural rules for the procurement process. It will define the treatment of public-private partnerships and unsolicited proposals, which often occur, and we often hear about these unsolicited proposals. Establishing a mechanism for reviewing complaints relating to public procurement and for suspending suppliers for misconduct or poor performance. And of course, defining standards of conduct required in public procurement and specific offenses related to procurement. Mr. President, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, modern law, is used internationally as a standard law in procurement, as it seeks to maximize competition according to fair treatment to all suppliers and to enhance transparency and objectivity. And this new procurement legislation, the bill before the is based on the law with appropriate amendments suitable to the needs of Barbados. So we've taken that as a sort of template, but we've tweaked it a bit in some areas. And the enactment of national procurement legislation based on this model law was one of the recommendations also coming out of the CARICOM single market and economy regional integration policy on public procurement. And it is seen that it would be likely to be more acceptable if we follow this methodology to international financial institutions and donors considering the use of country systems. They would be more inclined to look at us favorably as it relates to loans and to funding various activities in our country. Mr. President, the bill is divided into 9 parts. Part 1 defines the key terms used in the legislation and its application. And it also includes definition for public-private partnership and the whole matter of unsolicited proposals. Part 2 defines the role and functions of the key players in procurement, notably the Chief Procurement Officer, the head of the procuring entities, and the Tenders Committee. It also established in that part the Public Procurement Tribunal. It should be noted that the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs has a key role in the procurement process, and his duties and functions are detailed throughout the bill. Part 3 addresses the planning and initiation of procurement, and it speaks to the need to plan procurement in a rational manner, the preparation of procurement plans, the publication of forthcoming procurement and estimation of the value of procurement, and the procurement of common items and use of agents are also detailed. Part 4 deals with monetary thresholds, which determines the method of procurement to be used by a procuring entity, as well as certain rules and regulations. It speaks about establishing that open tendering is a standard method to be used, sets out the conditions and approval process for deviations from this standard. In that part 4 also speaks to matters of restricted tendering, requests for quotations, single source procurement, and framework agreements. Part 5 sets out how to treat unsolicited proposals, and it speaks about the receipt of these proposals, the eligibility criteria for consideration, the evaluation of these unsolicited proposals, and contract and agreement. Part 6 sets out the general rules and procedures applicable to all methods of procurement, and it gives a description of the procurement and the use of the standard trade terms and conditions. Part 7 speaks to the registration, eligibility, and qualifications of suppliers and mandates the Chief Procurement Officer to establish and maintain a register of suppliers. Of course, I spoke about earlier about the ability now for other players to become part of this process. Part 8 of the bill outlines the challenge proceedings and provides for appeals to the Procurement Tribunal and then procedures for making an application for an appeal, and it goes into detail as to various aspects of that. Part 9, Mr. President, is the miscellaneous section, and this speaks to the form of procurement contracts, the procurement record, and contract management record, the manuals and the documents and the instructions. It also speaks of sanctions and penalties for those who are found guilty of victimizing officers, assaulting, resisting, obstructing, refusing to provide information or giving false information. Mr. President, there are then 4 schedules. One, of course, speaks to the CARICOM Protocol on Public Procurement, and they also cover matters of General and Special Drug Tenders Committee, the Public Procurement Tribunal, and consequential amendments. Mr. President, I believe this procurement bill has been long in the coming. Long it's been going on for several years now, I believe. But it is seen as a very vital and very important bill of necessity to Barbados at this time so that we can maximize the use of our scarce public resources, and so that we can put behind us many of those rumors which we've heard over time and continue to hear as it relates to procurement processes and tendering processes and unsolicited proposals. Indeed, it will provide a single set of rules for all sectors, including procurement of drugs, and will apply to government ministries, departments, state-owned enterprises, and commercial state-owned enterprises that use public funds to finance procurement. Mr. President, I believe I've covered this in not a long time, given the date of the month and the week, and I beg that this bill be now read a second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walcott. Senator Dr. Holder.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Sorry?
Please.
I wish to offer a short contribution as we contemplate this particular bill before us. And I begin, sir, following on from where the leader of government business ended. The fact that this bill has been long in coming. Now, sir, for the time that I've been in this place, I've heard it said repeatedly by the opposition and even maybe some independent senators that government has been rushing through so many bills, and, you know, before you can think twice, having attended Senate 1 week, we are called back to debate a myriad of other bills, and there seemed to be this persistent rush. The fact is, sir, that cannot be said about this particular bill. This procurement bill, sir, has been around being discussed and negotiated for so long that the truth is I may have to even suggest I'm a little disappointed, sir, at the length of time it has taken for it to be completed. It has been around, sir, that long. And by way of maybe supporting that view, members may not be aware that as far back as 2009, sir, there was a project approved by the Inter-American Development Bank to assist government in the modernization of its procurement system. So sir, we're going that far back to really have an appreciation for the context of the bill that is before us. Back then, sir, some $5.9 million US dollars, that is, were approved for this particular project. It included a number of components. The leader of government business mentioned the issue of the IT infrastructure, the issue of capacity building, moving from central purchasing department to a more modern unit, sir, within government, and ensuring that stakeholders can participate, sir, in the procurement process. I believe research suggests, sir, that between 30 to 50% of government expenditure is now being considered for public procurement. So, sir, it has the potential to benefit a number of stakeholders. But, sir, the issue back then, in my view, even though it was only $5.9 million, would you believe, sir, that a portion of this had to be returned to the IADB, primarily because we were not able, sir, to complete all of the components of the project. And a major part of that is now where we're at today, the regulatory framework, because I believe it was component one of that project that spoke to strengthening the regulatory regime, sir, which include the necessary policy instruments, which include the legislation that is now before us. So, sir, we lost out on some of that funding because it has taken so long, Mr. President, to be able to conclude the legislation and to put in place the regulatory regime for this. But I'll admit, Mr. President, before I move on from this point, that it was a very enlightening and educational experience. I had the opportunity to sit on the steering committee, sir, for this particular project, and I must admit that the overall objectives of the project, especially relative to including the MSME sector and in the whole procurement process, and ensuring a transparent process, must be commended. And I therefore, sir, want to say that it was a very well thought out and a well constructed project and concept. But as I move on now to today and what is before us at this point in time, sir, I want to, in making my contribution around this bill, really support why we need to have public procurement legislation and a public procurement regime at this point in time. Sir, I spoke last session, maybe we were looking at the credit reporting bill, and as I was preparing for this, it reminded me, sir, that these works thus far are really intended to benefit, more so, at least in my view, SMEs. They're really intended to benefit SMEs. As we talked about the credit reporting bill, the point was made about, improving the environment for risk, enhancing risk appetite by mitigating the fallout and so on. That will benefit small firms. That will benefit businesses, period. And here it is again, sir, that we have a discussion around public procurement, and the intention is that we're able again to benefit the MSME sector. We're able again to benefit the business community by having a piece of legislation and a regulatory framework that allows for a more transparent, a more open, and a more accountable way, sir, of how we treat to government procuring goods and services from the business community. Sir, would you remember, recall that I believe it was just prior to the 2008 general election, one of the manifestos in circulation at the time, sir, gave a commitment that should that party win at the polls, they were going to set aside 40% of the procurement of their goods and services to SMEs. Now, Mr. President, wearing another hat that I wear, I was enthused. I was excited about that. I felt that for a party, a potential administration, to commit to 40% of the procurement of its goods and services to this sector, Mr. President, it was worthy of commendation. I lauded such an effort. The reality is that the party at the time, it did win at the polls, and wearing that other hat, I spent the next 5 years or so, reminding them of this commitment of this 40%. The truth is, another 5 years came, so we never got the 40%. Actually, let me correct myself to say that the minister responsible for small business in the last year of that term did make a public pronouncement that the 40% will now be operationalized. Sir, the reality is, though, sir, it was the last year of the term. So the possibility of it being operationalized back then, was not realistic. But nonetheless, we waited. And I recall many of my constituents, wrote, called, reminded at every public forum, where is this 40% of the procurement of government's goods and services? Because this is significant. To make such a commitment, sir, is a significant undertaking. It tells me that, one, you understand the value of the MSME sector. You understand the power that government has in being able to regulate and legislate and so on, and therefore you want to use that power to enfranchise this community. So, sir, we were excited about it. It didn't occur. And I believe that the researchers at some point may try to assess why that happened. But from where I sit now, I took note that this legislation didn't propose any percentage to the sector. And, sir, I still feel that should be considered. I still feel that there should be a commitment, even if it is in the regulations to follow, sir, that government will set aside a percentage to vulnerable groups. And I say vulnerable because I'm going now beyond MSMEs. I'm suggesting that there should be a commitment, sir, that includes women owned businesses. There should be a commitment, sir, that includes youth owned businesses, even the differently able, sir, who would consider entrepreneurship and business ownership, sir, for their own self-sufficiency and so on, should be included. So I believe that a revisit to that percentage, a revisit to setting aside, sir, a percentage of government procurement for specific groups, vulnerable groups, should be considered. Sir, and it is not far-fetched, because research would suggest that this obtains in other jurisdictions. There are other countries, sir, developing and developed, just that the developed may not, articulate it as directly as the developing countries may have. But there's data out there that suggests that this has been adopted, sir, by many a government as a part of its policy instrument to enfranchise and to develop vulnerable groups through public procurement. So, sir, I from where I sit, I hope that this can be considered, even if it is, as I said, sir, at the level of the regulations that would support the operationalization of this instrument. Moving on, sir, I want to speak a little bit about why I think having procurement legislation at this time is needed and is good for our overall development. And so you know that I like to research these issues and like to cite what the researchers tell us, because it's important to make sure that you're not just pontificating on an issue, but that it is that you can bring data to support your views. And the World Bank in 2017, I think the links were updated in 2021, would have done some work, sir, on policies that promote SMEs' participation in public procurement. And it's good reading, sir. It's interesting reading. I think that, you know, all of the chamber who are interested in this and being edified should maybe consider reading that bit of research. But sir, there are a few points mentioned there under the caption of the rationale for SME preferential procurement that I wish to share with the chamber before I take my seat. Preferential, sir, and this goes back to that point I made about setting aside for vulnerable groups. There must be, in my view, some sort of preference considered and contemplated for those that are vulnerable within the society. The first point that needs to be underscored, sir, is that there's a prevalence of SMEs within the economy. We know this. I mean, it's maybe been said time and time again, to the point where many policymakers, academia, whomever, in all of these speeches now, as we speak to overall development policy, including the MSME sector, enfranchising SMEs, sir, is being talked about, because we understand and we appreciate that when you look at the overall makeup of the business community, sir, the fact is, globally, it's not just Barbados and it's not just the region. Globally, the majority of the private sector is small business. Sir, small business in the EU, 99%, based on their data. The US, high 90s again. Right here in Barbados, around 96%. Sir, the majority of our firms are SMEs. And as a result of that, any government policy, sir, in my view, any government policy that speaks to procurement and government procurement, public procurement, must contemplate this particular sector. They are too prevalent, sir, around us to ignore. Not only do they contribute economically, I make the point time and time again, but they contribute socially. And so I was very pleased, and the leader of government business in his summary did speak to the section here, I think it is part 4 of the bill, that gives the opportunity, sir, for state-owned enterprises, commercial state-owned enterprises, government departments, and so on, to consider this critical sector relative to the procurement of goods and services. One point that I'll hasten to mention here is that oftentimes those governments that do include SMEs fail at times, sir, to ensure that they not only get a share, sir, a percentage share, but that they get a percentage of the value that is significant enough to really help to strengthen this particular community. So I just want to stick that pin in there, that it is not just a percentage share, but that the value, sir, of that contribution must also be significant. And so it takes me to that second point. Not only is there prevalence, Mr. President, of MSMEs within our economy, there are benefits, sir, of procuring from small firms. Now I know, I see Senator Hunt with a smile even under his mask. I know, sir, that there are many who do have a challenge with this point. The point is, there are benefits to procuring from SMEs. Now, I cannot stand here this morning and say otherwise. That doesn't mean that I am not aware, sir, of some of the challenges. And let me be frank, sir, I've recently, within the last year or so, been undertaking a construction project. Sir, I've had to put some extra dye in my hair because of the graze that I've gotten as a result of this project. Why do I say that? In dealing, sir, with some small providers. Sir, it's not easy. I am not going to stand here and lie to you and kid you that, you know, it is a walk in the park. It is not easy, right? And many in this chamber, many listening, sir, through you, can attest to the fact that they have been through some horrendous experiences, sir, having to deal with a lot of unprofessionalism by business providers. Sir, I raise my hand. I raise my hand and say I too. People who you want to support their business, sir, you give them an opportunity to prove themselves. Sir, they don't understand and have an appreciation for punctuality, for honoring elements of the contracts, even though sometimes you govern your relationship, your working relationship with a contract. Sir, there are myriad of issues, and I can call them out. They've been through these situations. I even have colleagues who know my profession, sir, wearing another hat, and they tell me categorically, I will not support these type of firms. I prefer to go elsewhere. And sir, despite all of that, let me also hasten to add, I'm still committed to the cause. And I want to encourage everyone here to be committed to the cause. Why? Because we have a responsibility to make sure that that group, sir, is able to bring a level of sophistication to their business operations. And so this is why the financial literacy and the constant focus on entrepreneurial training and capacity building, this is why all these things are important. So you cannot discount the fact that you may come across a few who have not honored their commitments, who have not honored their contracts, who've quoted you one price today and come back tomorrow and has doubled that without any prior notice to you. So you cannot hold these things against the sector simply because we understand the value of the sector. And that's the point. We understand the value of the sector. And so policymakers, legislators, educators, and so on, we have a responsibility now to build capacity in the sector. We have a responsibility to build capacity, to make sure that small firms can grow and they can develop. So I want to hasten to add, yes, we've been through some negative experiences, sir, but we're not going to hold that against them at all. We're going to work with them as much as we can to help them to improve, to build capacity, to become professional, to employ sophisticated ways and best practices in how they go about doing business. Because we understand, my first point was the prevalence of them. They make a significant contribution, and they can make a significant contribution, and therefore we're going to help them. So there are benefits. There are benefits, sir, not only, as I said, economically, there are benefits socially. Simple case, sir. And we use this many times in our training. Simple case in how the economy works and how money circulates and how we're able to help business. Because any individual in here, as they're able to hire, sir, the very small, let's say landscaper. You're able to hire a landscaper to come into your community. Mr. President, very simple analogy. And that landscaper does a good job. You're satisfied. That landscaper, sir, you're able to maybe even recommend to your neighbor next door and the one down the street and so on. And as a result of you bringing that very small landscaper into your community, sir, he does a good job, give you quality service for the price that you've paid. He's able then to maybe attract additional customers. And from that one opportunity, sir, with that landscaper who may have come around on his bike with a weed whacker, you're able to see that landscaper, sir, getting additional contracts within the community and expanding, building now capacity in the firm. So it goes, sir, from that bicycle and he goes and gets a panel van, sir. He's able now to go from that weed whacker to the other pieces of equipment, the lawnmower and so on, and he's able to go from just him now providing the service to hiring 1 or 2 guys, sir, from the community. And immediately we're building capacity within the firm, and that business is able, Mr. President, to grow. Simply done. And so we've taken, not one, but we've taken about 3 or 4 young persons, sir, who would otherwise have been unemployed, and they now have, sir, a reliable source, a credible source even of revenue. That simple analogy, Mr. President, has been researched and researched time and time again, and has demonstrated, Mr. President, that MSMEs present the greatest opportunity for reducing unemployment, more so than large firms. It has been proven. MSMEs provide a disproportionate share of gross and net new jobs, and high growth new firms provide the majority of the new firm jobs. So the fact is that this group, Mr. President, this group offers the opportunity for us to see a reduction in unemployment because they have a greater capacity, sir, to soak up, as it were, the unemployment that exists within communities, within the country, and so on. So there is a benefit then to procuring from them. Not only are you going to get, good quality goods and services and so on, but you're able, sir, to be able to see a reduction, impact the unemployment rate within the society. But they face some barriers, and this is my third point. They do face some barriers relative to procurement, and this is why building capacity is important. Because as you know, sir, procurement in and of itself can be a bit tedious. It can be, somewhat challenging, especially when it comes to the pre-bidding stage. Again, it is suggested from the same World Bank report that MSMEs do have a challenge at times, sir, with the publication of the contract opportunities, the communication around these opportunities. They at times are not able to bid competitively, sir, for the particular product. They have difficulties due to the size of the contracts. We know that many contracts, sir, many opportunities tend to be extremely big, extremely huge, and therefore can be intimidating at times for small firms. Also, sir, not only the pre-bidding stage, but also the application stage. It is said that there tends to be, a high level of bureaucracy, sir, during the application stage relative to the documents required. Grant the grants or the opportunities rather sometimes can be burdensome relative to preparing quotations, and so firms at times can have a lack of capability and capacity, sir, in writing formal bids and so on. So there are some challenges, sir, relative to the procurement process, and therefore my point here is that we want to help in building capacity that firms can actually participate in the public procurement process. And this is why I particularly liked, Mr. President, the component of this bill that speaks to the IT infrastructure and the modernization of that infrastructure. Because gone are the days, and again the data show that when you're doing it manually, when you have a bidding process that is manual, it takes an inordinately long time, sir, not only time but cost to be able to drive to the government department to collect the bidding documents, to go back, to analyze, to get all your information together, then to drive back there, sometimes persons drive the second time and forgot their certificate of clearance. They have to go back and whole host of issues. So there's a cost, sir, associated with the manual format. So our ability through this legislation to have this now done in such a way that you're using the technology, it is digital. The government department, the state-owned enterprise puts up the tender on the website or whatever mechanism is being used. It is there, sir. It is easily accessed by the small firm. Information uploaded, and in a very short period of time, the process is completed. So this will help, sir, in my view, with the capacity building of the firm, because, as I said, there are some barriers that have been identified. And then finally, sir, I mentioned before that we want for this procurement exercise to really provide for those that are vulnerable. And so I want to make a call for incorporating gender, sir, in SME procurement. The fact is, we need to make sure that our female-owned businesses are considered and included as well. Sir, data from this World Bank study indicates that women-owned businesses and women entrepreneurs currently win just about 1% of public procurement contracts worldwide. Just about 1%. And yet we know that there are a number of female-owned firms, right now here in Barbados. The data suggests that they're about between 33 to 35% of our firms owned and managed by females. Okay? And if that is the case, then, Mr. President, there must be, in my view, greater consideration for this group in the whole public procurement process. So we must find a way of enfranchising those that are vulnerable to be a part of the procurement process. So these are a few key points, sir, coming from this study that I thought would benefit us in appreciating and understanding why it is that public procurement and the legislation is needed to help strengthen the sector. Before I sit, sir, I want to make this final point. Whereas we want to make sure, sir, that SMEs can benefit, and based on the proposals here, there is the opportunity, and I'm calling for greater consideration, maybe in the regulations, that we set aside a percentage for vulnerable groups. We do have an added challenge, and that, sir, is the issue around the payments to SMEs. Sir, a small firm, a medium firm, does not have, sir, the flexibility, does not have, sir, the resources to wait for a particular receivable to be settled 90 days and 120 days, 180 days, etc. Sir, again, I was looking at some research that showed in developing countries, governments, sir, take between 30 to 90 days to settle bills. Developed countries, the majority are able to settle within 30 days. But developing countries, this World Bank studies suggest between 30 to 90 days. Sir, no small business can wait 90 days for that invoice to be settled. Matter of fact, I have many who call me when they're waiting on a particular bill to be paid. Can you call this particular ministry? Can you call the PS? Can you call the minister? I have staff to pay. I have resources to purchase, etc. Sir, no small firm can wait to have a bill settled in 60 days, 90 days, sir, 120 days. And so, while we work on our procurement regime and all the other policies and so on that are intended to help these firms. Sir, equally, we have to, it is a must, sir, improve the settlement of our debts to small firms in particular. And I'm making a case for them because the truth is that the larger ones, many of them can, the truth is they can pay. Some of them, they tell you they have a bill there and, you know, they have the resources, they have overdraft, they have capacity, but the small ones can't. They simply can't. And sir, I do not even know, and I do not understand why it takes so long. Yes, I know sometimes governments, the world over, not just Barbados, governments do have cash flow issues. We are aware of that because governments rely on the taxes and other revenues coming in to help with their with the management of their affairs. It's like any business. You need the revenue, you need the income in order to manage your expenditure. So I'm aware that there are some challenges. But sir, you know, I would hasten to add, before I sit, that there is a bureaucratic culture that exists in government, sir, that needs to be addressed. There is a bureaucratic culture that exists where there are persons who, mind you, they are paid religiously on the 26th. They're paid religiously on the 26th. But sir, there are some sections where I am afraid persons do not have an appreciation for those who are running businesses. I don't understand and appreciate the concept of time is money, sir. And therefore, while they're being paid, yes, religiously on the 26th, that small firm that provided catering to that function that happened a month ago cannot wait any longer for that invoice to be settled. And so, I know, sir, it is not a popular subject. It is a subject that, truth is, many a government all over really don't want to address. I am aware of that. But it has to be addressed. Because if it is that we're going to move as an economy from just being efficient relative to the global competitiveness index to being sophisticated, we have been at the efficiency pillar, sir, for years. I believe more than a decade even. But we need to move to become a sophisticated jurisdiction relative to our competitiveness. And therefore, this issue of bureaucracy has to be addressed. So I'm making a call, sir, that while we put the procurement legislation in place and while we'll all speak to the benefits that our sector, our business sector will accrue from this, we have to equally, sir, put the mechanisms in place to ensure that our small firms in particular are paid promptly or as promptly as it's practical, because they simply cannot afford, sir, to have this inordinately long period of time before their bills are settled. Many of them, sir, run the risk of even going out of business. I know of examples where firms, sir, have been at the brink, can't pay staff. I have one in the construction sector in my organization, sir, that has receivables over $500,000 in a particular ministry, sir. And therefore, we're calling for improvement in this area. So, sir, I conclude by thanking you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this bill. And I believe that this public procurement regime will definitely help to strengthen the sector. We need to see a percentage, sir, being set aside for the vulnerable. We need to see improvement in settling our debts. And the IT infrastructure will definitely help to fast track the overall bidding process for small firms in particular. Sir, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Ford. Any other speakers on this bill? Senator Dr. Rogers.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'll be very brief on this particular bill. It was not my intention to speak on it. However, I've always been of the opinion that our problem in Barbados is not legislation. We have some very good laws in this country. The challenge has always been how people in positions of public trust and authority act. And I believe that this bill is timely, as Senator Holder would have pointed out not long ago, but it's also one that challenges us to be as genuine as we possibly can in carrying out our duties here. I listened with great interest as she made the point that the government must settle its bills, and in a timely manner, given what was passed here the last time we were here, and the fact that one of the challenges we had was a clause that was very open-ended, which really didn't say what persons may be issued bonds for, and which is one of the challenges that was raised here. And so some of these MSEs or SMEs that would be mentioned here can very well find themselves waiting for 42 months to be paid under that particular clause, but that's that particular bill. What I wish to deal with here, sir, is Section 18 of this particular bill, restricted tendering, where it says, subject to subsection 2, a procuring entity may, with permission of the director, that is the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, conduct procurement by means of restricted tendering in any of the following circumstances. The goods, 1, the goods, works, or services to be procured are available from 10 suppliers or less. B, that's A. B, there's an urgent need for goods, works, or services to be procured, and 1, the circumstances giving rise to the urgency were neither foreseeable by the entity nor the result of dilatory conduct on the part of the entity, and 2, engaging in open tendering would be impractical. B2, sir, engaging in open tendering will be impractical. I would just like to understand what that means, given the law here. As Senator Holder rightly pointed out, there's a bureaucratic culture in the government that needs to be addressed. And I believe that this particular section of the bill is rather open, and I would believe that there needs to be further explanation in terms of what would constitute being impractical in this particular case. The reason why I'm raising this, sir, in a perfect world, we can pass this bill and nothing will happen. It wouldn't mean anything. But we are in an age and in a political climate, not only in Barbados, in the world, where there's a woke culture, and persons tend to question the genuineness of everything. And I believe it challenges us who make laws to be as precise as we possibly can. This is in no way an intention to question the character of whoever is the director. But we have to remember when we make laws, I used to always tell my students at Codrington College, Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8 is a very important passage in the Old Testament. It is pivotal. Is that portion having gone through Genesis and speaking about the people, Jacob's family being brought down to Egypt and how they were multiplying and everything was going well. And then in Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8 it says, then there emerged a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph. We always have to remember that the laws we're making are not just for this generation, but we must set things in place that are as closed as possible, or as tight as possible, to ensure that the nation can properly function and that all things can take place as above board as possible. And when we leave things open-ended like this, engaging in open tendering will be impractical. I would like to understand what that means. Nonetheless, while we're on the subject of tendering, I would have raised it in this chamber before, that increasingly it appears in Barbados that we have a lot of large companies that are one-stop or one-stop shops, where contracts are awarded and then all subsidiary contracts are part of the same company that received the award. And therefore, the pie, the little pie that we have here in Barbados, is not being equally spread around. And so some of these small and medium enterprises do not even get a look into the window, far less a welcome through the door. And I would like us to do something about that. I do not know how we will structure the legislation to do it, but certainly I believe that that is an area that we seriously need to look at in this country, where there are these large companies, and for example, you get a contract for a building, and the electrical contract and every other contract goes down to the gardening, goes to some subsidiary of that large company that received the contract. And so nothing gets spread around, everything stays in the same place. So I think that is one of the areas we should look at. I don't know if it is covered in this legislation, as has been pointed out before. It's rather lengthy, but I just wanted to raise this question on Section 18 on what is meant there by that subsection which states engaging in open tendering will be impractical. That's just my thing. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Rogers. Senator Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is going to be an extremely brief presentation. I wish to speak on the broader context for legislation on procurement as it relates to other matters which will be discussed here today and those that have gone before. Mr. President, I want to read a list of legislation that has been passed under this administration since 2018, and this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination, Mr. President. We have recently passed the Prevention of Corruption legislation. Last week, we had the Customs Bill. In July of 2020, Mr. President, we had the Anti-Corruption Agency established by legislation. And in 2019, Mr. President, at this same time of the year, on December 14th, we had the passage of the Public Finance Management Bill. During the course of today's sitting, Mr. President, we will be debating other items of legislation which fall within the broad umbrella of governance, good governance, anti-corruption, and of course, ultimately, the time will come where the integrity legislation is returned to office. This to Parliament. Mr. President, the suite of legislation to which I just referred was done deliberately. There's oftentimes a conversation publicly and in particular with some groups that has a narrow focus only on the passage of either integrity legislation or anti-corruption legislation. But Mr. President, if you understand the notion of anti-corruption and integrity, and you look at the importance of how those things are then integrated into your governance mechanisms, the question of public procurement is a key tenet in a government's overall arsenal to prevent corruption and to promote measures supporting integrity. This is yet another step on behalf of the government of Barbados in ensuring that we have a comprehensive framework that governs our governance systems and ensures that there is very little opportunity for persons to abuse the system for their own personal gain. And so I would wish to support the legislation as a further continuation of this government's commitment to ensuring that we have that framework. The second point that I would wish to make, Mr. President, is the actual application of the Public Finance Management Act. Passed in 2019. It is very much in application, and I want to make the connection between the Public Finance Management Act and this body of legislation. Mr. President, the Public Finance Management Act is incorporated into this legislation as a key point of reference for one main reason. Well, for many reasons, but the one that I want to focus on today is this, Mr. President. When this government came to office in 2018, and as recent as last week when the Honourable Leader of Government Business introduced the question of debt bonds, there were any number of debts that the government knew it was coming into, and there were debts that we did not know of. There are debts that were discovered subsequently, and mechanisms had to be found to respond to those things. Mr. President, and a big part of that was because there was no centralized management of how public procurement and public finance management took place between central government agencies, state-owned enterprises, and commercial state-owned enterprises, and a significant number of debts were accumulated under state-owned enterprises and commercial state-owned enterprises that then were unable to be accounted for, and the central government then had to take responsibility for. By centralizing the Public Financial Management Act, Mr. President, and incorporating it within public procurement in this fashion, Mr. President, it covers the entire obligations now assigned to commercial state-owned enterprises and state-owned enterprises to conform to the dictates of central government in terms of procurement. State-owned enterprises that previously, Mr. President, would have contributed, as I mentioned before, significantly to the accumulation of unaccounted for debt, now are required to submit a procurement plan. They are now required to identify in January of every year, in preparation for their estimates, what their procurement expenditure would look like during the course of the year. And that is meant to be incorporated. If you understand, I guess everybody in the chamber understands the timing of annual estimates preparation. Those things are now incorporated and accounted for under a single entity. Equally so, Mr. President, under the existing framework of the same PMF, Private Finance Management Act, you also now have a results framework that every single ministry, every single agency is now required to participate in. And what you will see in the upcoming estimates, Mr. President, is that you have a new performance-driven basis on which estimates of expenditure, including procurement under state-owned enterprises and commercial state-owned enterprises, must also conform. That too, Mr. President, is part of the overall reform and good governance that this administration is putting in place. The third element of the actual bill, Mr. President, that I would wish to speak of is the specific elements that speak to performance contracts. Mr. President, my colleague, Senator Holder, spoke about instances where you paid for a service, but you didn't get where you paid for it, what you paid for. Incorporated in public procurement, Mr. President, in the specifics of this particular bill is the recommendation and the requirement now for performance-based contracting to take place. Persons who are supplying goods and services to governments are required now to meet certain performance-based standards that ensure that the government of Barbados spending money on behalf of the people of Barbados is at all times getting what it paid for, because this is the people's money. And this is critical, Mr. President. And so we are not only holding ourselves to account, but we are holding people who provide services and are paid with the people's money also to account. This brings me to my final 2 points, Mr. President. I want to piggyback a little bit on the comments from Senator Holder. Mr. President, I have had the opportunity, I think I probably under my ministry had the largest number of commercial and state-owned enterprises in the government ministries. There are 14 agencies that sit under the Ministry of Tourism. And in a previous life, when I was chairman of the port, I chaired the Tenders and Procurement Committee there. And one of the challenges that I have seen firsthand, Mr. President, because oftentimes I was on the other side, coming from the private sector as well, advocating for and in agreement with, and I still am in agreement with, the incorporation of SMEs and MSMEs in having a greater share of the projects. But not only is it a developmental opportunity for them once they have been able to be awarded the project, Mr. President, but I want to start before we get there. I want to say, Mr. President, that there has to be a developmental undertaking, and I'm hopeful that in collaboration with the private sector, that with the passage of this legislation and the incorporation of performance-driven basis in the legislation, that there is a developmental program that is developed to enable micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and first-timers in particular who are looking at opportunities which have been advertised to submit high-quality bids that can be favorably considered. It is very challenging sometimes, Mr. President. You have a conversation sometimes in the public space that the same people win the bids all the time, or only a few win the bids all the time. Mr. President, a lot of that is driven on the quality of the submissions. In some instances, you have concerns about only non-nationals having been able to be successful in a bid, or big companies from on the outside. But you look at the quality of the bids that were submitted, and when you look at the rating and the ranking using the established criteria, oftentimes the standard being required isn't always met. And sometimes it is met and exceeded, at other times it is not. I would love to be able to see an environment where the quality of bids is something that we focus on from a strategic perspective and from a governance perspective as well, but strategic as well, so that we have a larger number of SMEs having opportunities to submit successful tenders, not because I know somebody and they tell me they're going to give me a little business or they're going to help me out, but because you have submitted such a high quality bid that is so strategic and visionary that and is well costed, that it can be accepted. And that is one of the things that I'm hopeful for. And then once that is done, Mr. President, the final part of it is where Senator Rogers spoke about it, Senator Holder started it. I have seen, even in the tourism sector, we have a number of small enterprises, including direct tourism services, and even hotels, including small hotels. It is impossible, Mr. President, for them to have the carrying costs for weeks, months, 90 days, and sometimes it can be longer. And the notion that my salary is going to come at the end of the day like nothing else is of relevance to you is something that perhaps is a problem. Because if my salary is coming and I am processing your paperwork and I'm responsible for making sure that you get your payments, sometimes, Mr. President, I don't feel incentivized because I don't know the pain of not being able to pay my workers. I don't know the pain of having Light and Power or Water Authority calling to shut off the utilities to my business because I haven't paid my bills. And that can extend over an extended period of time. I have seen it in the tourism sector, Mr. President, more times than I can count. This morning, before I came here, I was proud to be part of a launch, public-private sector partnership between tourism and a private entity launching a product called bookbarbados.com. We, through private investment, Mr. President, supported the establishment of bookbarbados.com, which gives an opportunity for local service providers, accommodation, rental car companies, attractions, wherever they are, businesses in Barbados, to be able to sign up on a single portal, single global platform to book everything and to curate everything about your experience coming to Barbados. And Mr. President, one of the reasons why, not just the fact that we are proud of being Barbadians, not just the fact that it was built for Barbados by Barbadians and it is domiciled in Barbados. No, that's not the only reason. Mr. President, we have had a long history of international entities conducting business in Barbados, bidding on projects, winning tenders to provide services to Barbados, and taking a really long time, 90 days, 120 days, to pay Barbadian firms. If we find that unacceptable, Mr. President, when it is international firms, I put it to you, colleagues and Mr. President, that it is unacceptable when we do it to our own. We have to pay businesses when they provide goods and services, and we have to be able to not be, especially as a government, the reason why so many firms fold. And so, Mr. President, those are the only things that I wanted to say today, but I especially wanted to ensure that we understood that this is a continuation of this government's commitment to fighting corruption. But I want to offer perhaps an example of what I understood to be restricted tendering in answer to Senator Rogers, if you would permit me. But I recall, Mr. President, maybe a year ago, when the Attorney General, the Honorable Attorney General, announced that in the port at the time we were procuring scanners for the port. And I remember being very intrigued by when he announced the number and people asking, but did you tender? Was there a public tender? Was there anything in the newspaper? I didn't see anything in the newspaper. And then there were people who went to say, well, this can't be the price that they're paying. They got to be thieving the people money. It can't be true because I went on Amazon, I went online, and I see scanners, and this is how much it costs. Mr. President, I think we also have to be clear at times that there are no companies doing some of the things that are required in Barbados. At that time, Mr. President, the company Sectus was not in Barbados. There are no companies, I don't know of any companies that produce security scanning equipment in country. I know of companies that may provide servicing of the equipment once procured, but they're non-domiciled. And so under those conditions, Mr. President, the rules, the financial rules allowed for you to procure from a limited number of service providers where there were none locally, and it was a critical matter for national security purposes for us to be able to complete the procurement process, even without a public tendering process. And so those are some of the instances where you may see just a few companies. You may not see it publicly because it is not available in some instances locally at all. And so with those few words, Mr. President, I want to commend this bill to this honorable chamber, and I give it my support. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Here are the speakers. Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank my three honorable colleagues who participated in this debate. As I said, I think we've all agreed that it is very important, this bill. Senator Rogers raised a query about Section 18(1)(b)(2) about engaging in open tendering when it would be impractical. I believe this section covers what is currently covered by Rule 239, and it speaks to those matters. I've been trying to reach the AG, but I have an example because only recently, Mr. President, we established a mission in Nairobi. We're required to outfit that mission. It requires work to be done on the mission. It's a space provided by the government of Kenya for a CARICOM office to accommodate 4 or 5 CARICOM countries. We are undertaken to outfit our specific area. This is a Government of Barbados project in Kenya. We cannot conduct an open tendering process here within Barbados for a project, although we are spending funds over there. So we had to seek the 239 and the guidance of the DFE in that specific occasion. I see it as situations like that which would be very infrequent, I would assume. Mr. President, I want to beg, I know it is a luminous bill, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time. Thank you.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave this chamber and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honorable Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Senate is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, we will be calling in parts and clauses.
Permission granted to be called in parts.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 to 3 stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 to 3 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 to 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 4 to 8 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 to 8 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 9 to 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 9 to 15 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, Clauses 9 to 15 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 16 to 62.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 16 to 62 stand part.
The question is that Part 4, Clauses 16 to 62 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 63 to 79.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 63 to 79 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, Clauses 63 to 79 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 80 to 84.
Chairman, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 80 to 84 stand part.
The question is that Part 6, Clauses 80 to 84 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 85 to 93.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 85 to 90. Sorry. I beg to move that Clause 7.
Part 7.
Part 7, clauses 85 to 93 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, Clauses 85 to 93 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 94 to 104.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 94 to 104 stand part.
The question is that Part 8, Clauses 94 through 104 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 105 to 117.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 105 to 117 stand part.
The question is that Part 9, Clauses 105 to 117 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Fourth schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to being the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Public Procurement Act 2021.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Public Procurement Act 2021. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be now suspended for 1 hour until 2:30 for lunch.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m. today. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting stands suspended until 2:30 p.m. today.